You cannot. Or you cannot. Same thing with automobiles, because the tariffs, Mr. Trump is talking about putting tariffs on European automobiles coming here. Tariffs have already changed. Let me give you one example, just so you see. In 1963, long time ago, the United States imposed a tariff on European trucks, not cars, trucks, light trucks. It's a long story. It had to do with a fight over chicken produced in the United States that they wanted to sell in Europe. The Europeans would have none of it. They wouldn't allow the chickens. They still don't allow chickens. You all know about the chickens. In the United States, chickens are washed with chlorine. Every time you eat a piece of chicken, you are eating chlorine. In America, that is thought of as very sanitary. The Europeans look upon that as barbaric. So they don't allow the chicken, right? Which is one of the reasons we have so much chicken and it's so cheap, because we can't give that crap away. Okay? In retaliation, this is the truth, I didn't make this stuff up. You couldn't, I haven't imagination. In retaliation for the Europeans on chicken, just to give you an idea of how this works, the United States put a tariff on light trucks. Suddenly, at 25%, a big one. So suddenly, the American car producers, Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, faced a new situation. This was delicious. They now could produce trucks which before they couldn't give away because the Europeans were producing better trucks at a lower price. Now the Europeans were screwed because even though they produced, let's say, a truck at 10% less, with a 25% tariff, they were now more expensive even though they were more efficient. Notice, efficiency counted for nothing. Only in the minds of economists is efficiency a very important matter. But in the real world, it's as important as the number of pennies that fell into your shoe on the way over here. You don't care. So what did General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler do? They said, we can make more money on the pickup truck, the light truck, than we can on cars, which means we are now going to persuade the American people that the manly thing is to have a truck. You're not a real, the women they gave up on. The women in those days didn't buy trucks, didn't buy cars. That was a man thing to do. So you went after the men and you had an image, remember in the magazine, of a very tough guy with boots and he was climbing into his truck. Americans buy an ungodly number of these absurdly useless trucks. Why? Because we love the truck. Oh, come on, don't be naive. You had to be taught that there's something, ready? It's not easy, that there's something sexy about a truck. You realize how impoverished your sexuality has to be to get you going on a truck? Think about it. We produced a culture of the truck, of the pickup truck, as a somehow, people have to have it. People have nothing, who never take anything anywhere. And what they do take could fit in the trunk of a regular sedan, but they have to have a truck. They don't feel like they're a full male without a truck. That's not a product of some peculiarity of American culture or some peculiarity of masculinity. That's a product of a tariff. That's how tariffs shape a society. We are obsessed with trucks for no other reason than that we have imposed, by the way, we've imposed that. The same General Motors who doesn't want Trump to put tariffs now because the Chinese will retaliate and block them from getting into China, don't want anyone to touch the 25% tariff on trucks that they have profited from for the last half century. The lying, the duplicity, the fakery, it's as thick as any milkshake you ever had. Okay? Don't be fooled. This issue of tariffs and trade war is a fight between two kinds of enterprises. Yes, it's also a game for politicians, because politicians know that if they start talking, like Mr. Trump, if they start talking about tariffs, they're going to get very big donations from whoever wants the tariff to go up and whoever wants it to go down. They will collect and then make their excuses. Oh, I was hoping to get it down. I really appreciate the $400 million you gave me, but I couldn't get it done because of Mitch McConnell. Or make something up. But it's a good ploy for politicians to get donations for what otherwise it has nothing to do with anything to do with efficiency or anything else. It's not about national interest. It's a fight between two groups of capitalists, and they have to line us up in order to get the votes in Congress for what they want. So they appeal to the public by telling us fake stories about how we should be interested in whether the tariff is high or low. Last thing, China. Well, I think I've done that already, right? China is what the United States was. It's the up-and-coming economy. There is no way around that. You can jump up and down all you want. The rate of growth of the Chinese economy is a runaway dominant over the United States. This is the lowest rate of growth the Chinese have had in many years. It's roughly 6%. Our rate of growth this year, the United States, will be 2.5%. Do you understand? They're growing at 3 times the rate, and they have been growing at 3 times the rate for 30 years. That's why they caught up. And that's why they will surpass the United States as an economic unit within the next 10 years. And there's nothing Mr. Trump can do about it. He tried with his tariffs, didn't work. He tried with the trade war, it didn't work. He can't do it any more than he can control Iraq with his army and 17 years of occupation. He can't do, and that's very frustrating. I understand that. If I were in his shoes, I'd be very frustrated too. I might be so frustrated I would go assassinate a general someplace in order to look as though I'm doing something. But he can't. But he is a master at looking at something that will look as though. And here's what China allowed him to do. He figured he could look like he's really beating up on the Chinese. So he hit them with a bunch of tariffs. The Chinese, very smart people, hit back with a bunch of tariffs. Suddenly, the farmers in the Midwest who produce soybeans and other crops couldn't sell them to China, which is where they've been selling them all. The Chinese arranged to get them from Brazil and other parts of the world, and the United States farmers suddenly began to think that Mr. Trump wasn't the incarnation of Jesus Christ, but he was the incarnation of somebody from a lower origins, right? So that becomes dangerous from him. That becomes dangerous politically, which is why you will see next week the signing of a little agreement between the Chinese delegation coming here and Mr. Trump or Mr. Lighthizer, who's his trade representative. That's done for domestic political reasons, like most of this is. So Mr. Trump had to back down, but then of course he doesn't look like finally he's making a deal with and he will claim a great victory. Like he claimed today that the Iraqis stood down when they sent those missiles, the Iranians sent those missiles. He'll pretend a big victory, but Americans are not that dumb. So what is he going to do? He found a way, and you're going to see a lot of it. He found a Chinese company. He knew it was Chinese because it had a name that looks Chinese. It's called Huawei. Some of you may know this company because it's the world leader in 5G technology and all of that. So he is beating up on Huawei. He arranged for the arrest of a woman executive in Canada. Some of you know that last year. So she's still in house arrest at Vancouver or someplace where they're keeping her, the Canadians. And he is denying them. He's trying to use everything he can to get a maximum headlines. I am whacking Huawei. He even got the poor, pathetic Boris Johnson and told him that now that Brexit is reducing Britain to, really, the pits, he's going to punish them if they cut a deal with Huawei, which the British want to do. What will he do? The Americans will not share intelligence with the British. Given our intelligence, I don't understand why this is a threat, but that's another matter. It seems that the British do, which may tell you something about them. Great economy we don't have. Defeating China is not in the playbook. So for the United States, it's like what it was for Britain with America. You're going to go to war, you're going to have a revolution, you're going to have another war to try to stop what doesn't work, or you're going to recognize you better work out some accommodation here because the alternative really isn't available. It's very important to understand this. Now to leave you with one final note, a bit of a scare. This is a desperate government that we have, if you hadn't noticed it, but it's also an economy that's in tough shape. Mr. Trump is not the origin of most of what he does. He's a symptom. He's not the problem. He's acting out under the pressures he has to try to win an election that's difficult while being impeached. That's a tough game. He's doing the best he can to distract, but the real underlying problems are an economy that is in the kind of shape we're talking about, that has postponed its reckoning with its problems by a mountain of debt that it does not know how to control, and a blindness, a self-blindness that really needs psychiatric help. We are a society, we could solve these problems, but you have to admit you have them. It's like the old AA. If you're going to work with AA, you got to begin by going in there and saying, I'm an alcoholic, I have a problem, and then we can start working on how to help you and how to get you out of that mess. But we can't help you if you pretend to yourself that you don't have this problem. This is a country led by Mr. Trump who needs to set to itself, everything's fine, with the greatest economy. It's pathetic. Just like assassinating some general is a sign of weakness, of desperation, not a sign of you tough guy. It's childish. And the results have already been very bad for the United States. But again, the pretense, it's all a tough success. That's what I want to leave you with, thinking about that as you read the headlines. Remember, a month from now, Harriet Fraud and Juliana Forlano on the family and capitalism and intimate relationship.